Aklinan, previously merged in dissolution. Kalpita asmi, I shall create iti, thus asintayat, he thought. Translation and purport by Abhay Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Thereafter, he saw that the lotus on which he was situated was spread throughout the universe, and he contemplated how to create all the planets which were previously merged in that very same lotus. Please repeat. Thereafter, he saw the lotus on which he was situated was spread throughout the universe, and he contemplated how to create all the planets which were previously merged in that very same lotus. Purport. The seeds of all the planets in the universe were impregnated in the lotus on which Brahma was situated. All the planets were already generated by the Lord. All the living entities were also born in Brahma. The material world and the living entities were already generated in seedling forms by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Brahma was to disseminate the same seedlings all over the universe. The real creation is therefore called Sarga, and later on the manifestation by Brahma is called Visharga. The verse once again. Tat vilokya vyatvapi puskam yatadishtinam anena lokam prahlinam kalpitasmiti achintayat. Therefore, he saw that the lotus on which he was situated was spread throughout the universe, and he contemplated how to create all the planets which were previously merged in that very same lotus. Om Jnana Timanvasya Chanansana Shakya Sakshamitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Chichitayamagmano Vistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadahamyam Dadati Svapalam Tikam Vandeham Shiro Shri Yoda Padakamanam Shigum Vaishnavam Shirupam Jagajatam Sakanaragnatam Fitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sakalita Shivishakam Vitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Chatpate Kopesha Kopka Kantara Kanta Namastate Tapta Kansana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanashvari Vaishabhana Sutta Devi Pranamama Hari Priye Vancha Kalpta Vishakti Prasan Vivisa Padnam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namo Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shiva Sadhikaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharana Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskachai Desatane Srila Prabhupada Ki. So after a long time of austerity and receiving transcendental knowledge, then here Brahma contemplated how to create. So we can all learn very valuable lessons from Lord Brahma before he starts his service. He contemplates that making strategies how to do my service, strategic planning. That when Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan 3 days before he left this world, that practice for Damodar Maharaj was with him. And late in the night, they were discussing preaching strategies to the last moment. So it's good to have strategies for our preaching. It's Lord Krishna giving us the intelligence that if we preach to new people, it's important to know who is perceptive that for our preaching, and make a strategy that Srila Prabhupada was preaching to the hippies, and they were receptive because they wanted a change. They wanted a change. They did not agree with the lifestyle, materialistic lifestyle of their parents. So they were ripe for it, but they didn't have the right alternative, and Prabhupada gave the right alternative. Also, Lord Chaitanya, it's mentioned, I think, in the Madhya Lila 13th chapter. There, Lord Chaitanya visits Varanasi, Benares, or Kasi, many names. And there were this impersonalist under the lead of Prakashananda Saraswati. And Srila Prabhupada heard that this impersonalist, these Mayavadis were criticizing him. And he did not preach to them. But then a few chapters later, he comes back in Varanasi, stays at the house of Tapana Mishra, Chandrasekhar. And there's a Maharashtrian Brahmin who comes, and then he invites Lord Chaitanya to meet with the Mayavadis. And then he went. The situation was more favorable, and he preached to them and converted them all in Vaishnavas, into Vaishnavas. So making plans for our preaching, for our service. But it's not only making plans. Where we see here Lord Brahma is doing, in the previous verse said, Lord Brahma matured in practical knowledge. So you get transcendental knowledge, but then you have to bring that in practice. And that requires inner reflection, and it requires asking questions to the spiritual master and so on. Of course, Lord Brahma's spiritual master was within. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavye. Krishna gave him the knowledge that within. But to receive this knowledge, there are certain qualifications. And we heard in the second canto, there you have the prayers of Lord Brahma. And in these prayers, he prays for different things. He prays for protection against Maya. He prays for empowerment, and inner reflection, contemplation. These 3 things, he prays for that. Because that's important, that Krishna is a capacity in man. Without Krishna empowering us, nothing we can do. See that also Arjuna realized that when Krishna left this planet, and then he was overwhelmed by these coward boys. when he was bringing the queens from Dwarka to Vrindavan. That, of course, that was also Krishna's arrangement. But Arjuna understood before I was so, Krishna empowered me so much. And now without them, I'm powerless. But then he remembered Krishna's instructions in Bhagavad Gita. And he got again strength. That's the power of transcendental knowledge. So this verse here says, yes, Brahma was sitting on this lotus flower, and it's a big one because all the planets are in the lotus flower. That's a huge lotus flower. We cannot imagine. It covers most of the universe. That it's not an ordinary lotus flower. So he wanted to create or put the planets in place. So this is the beginning of Visarga, Brahma's creation. But it's not really creation, it's assembling things. All the products he needs for the creation are already there. All the elements are already there. Like when Srila Prabhupada had his morning walk at Yo Beach, when the sun came up, with some of his disciples, he was walking, and this Indian man came to him, was with a white kurta and a Gandhi hat. And he came to offer his pranams to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada asking about what are you doing? And the man said, I'm an industrialist. And then he said, yes, well, Srila Prabhupada asked, what are you producing? And the man said, oh, we are producing glass. And then Srila Prabhupada asked him, what is glass made of? Oh, the man said, glass is made from silicon sand. Oh, Srila Prabhupada said, to who belongs the sand? Where does it come from? Who produces it? And the man was pious and said, oh, it's coming from Bhagavan. And so Srila Prabhupada then said, oh, you are stealing from Bhagavan? And the man was shocked and he went away. And then after some time he walked back, Srila Prabhupada with his disciples in the other direction. And the man came back to Prabhupada and said, oh, Srila Prabhupada, he said to Prabhupada, oh, but I'm giving in charity. And Srila Prabhupada smiled and said, oh yes, you are a little thief. Anyway, it means we are not producing anything in this world. We can change the form, assemble things, but we are not creating. So Brahma, he reordered all these planets and I think he made 14 planetary systems and divided it in 3 parts: the higher planets, the middle planets, the lower planets. But the seed of the planets was already in the lotus flower. So that means that everything in this universe is Krishna's energy. That it's coming from him. Maisya Vamidampodam Sutramana Kanaiva. Sutramana Kanaya, like pearls are strung on a thread, on a thread. That's if we look at an earthen pot, finally it's earth inside, the element earth. And nobody can create earth. That's created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, but that is an important lesson here, that everything is resting on the energy of Krishna. Lord Krishna speaks in Bhagavad Gita about two kinds of energies, Bhumirapanalava, Kamana, Buddhavsa, Ankarityame, Vina Prakatyastate. These are my 8 separate material energies, Krishna says. Earth, air, ether, fire, mind, false ego, that water, yeah, mix it up a bit. That's 8 elements and false ego at the end. And then apayamitaspanyam prakatim vidime param. But besides this lower material energy, there is the higher energy, the spiritual energy. But it is all Krishna's energy, everything we see. And it's not just Krishna's energy. Krishna says, Maya dakshana prakati chuta cheta characham. I control all these energies. He's controlling all these energies every moment. So this vision of seeing Krishna everywhere is explained in Bhagavad Gita, and in the Bhagavatam in so many ways. Vidya Vinayasambhane Brahmana Kavayasti Nishman Shivshva Pakacha Panada Samadakshina. So one sees the soul in everyone's heart. But it goes further. An advanced devotee sees the super soul, and how the super soul is conducting and controlling the material energy. So nothing happens without the sanction of the Lord. So we have realizing that into its fullest extent is the Uttam Adhikar, that Uttam Adhikar, yeah, this is explained in the Bhagavatam 11-45. Sarva Bhutesya Pashat Bhagavat Bhavam Atmanaham. Bhutani Bhagavatatmani Esa Bhagavatottama. So the Uttamadikar, the highest devotee, that he sees Krishna everywhere in all beings, in everything. So we see here that Brahma has this elevated vision. He creates. We will hear more about the creation first and the 4 Kumaras soon, and all the visions of creation. And we see how Brahma will create from his mind. That Brahma has not a body as we. He has even not a body like the demigods. He has a causal body, a very, very subtle body. a body made of pure intelligence that is nearly a spiritual body. It's and is empowered by the Lord to create just by his consciousness. He adopts a certain mood suitable for creating a certain type of living entity. And he creates without the botheration of a mother, of a wife, Srila Prabhupada said, just from his mind. And Brahma himself, he creates, but he himself does not really know how he does it. How he does it. But that's also the case for us. That your heartbeat, how does it happen? Do you know? After eating, the digestion is going on. Do you know how it happens? Your blood is going to your veins. Do you control that? No. So that is the understanding that point makes one change one's behavior and inner attitude. It is said here that after long penance and transcendental knowledge of self-realization had matured Brahma in practical knowledge, immatured in practical knowledge. That's important. How did Brahma mature in practical knowledge? It was before the creation, but still he matured in practical knowledge. How did that happen? The process by which Brahma got this practical knowledge is the same process as we in Krishna consciousness will get the practical knowledge. And that's explained how this happened in the Bhagavad Gita, that Tesham Satayuktam Vacham Pritipavakam Dadami Buddhyogam Tam Yena Mam Priyantati. If one serves Krishna with a little love, the Dhamma Krishna gives Buddhi Yoga, and this Buddhi Yoga is exact this practical knowledge. It means realization, because in the next verse, Krishna explains that. Tesham evana kampartam amma jnana chamtava nasa jamatma bhavastu jnana dipana pashvata. I enter the heart. Of course, Krishna is already there. And with the lamp of knowledge, he helps the devotee how to practice this knowledge. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, even if a devotee is not so intelligent to understand the scripture and so on, if he serves with a little love, Krishna will give him this knowledge from within. Of course, there is one problem for us. Pretty Purvakam, a little love. Even that little love we don't have. We don't know in this world what is love. That we take it full dust. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj spent a whole chapter explaining the difference between lust and love. And we can hear it, but to practically get it. But if we don't have this little love, this Priti Purvakam, how then can we advance? Well, Krishna made the arrangement in Bhagavad Gita. Tatvine partner, pariprasna sivya protection teham, janas tatvadakshana. You approach the spiritual master, you inquire from him submissively and serve him. And then if you do that, if you follow the instructions of the spiritual master, what will be the result? The result will be that Krishna is pleased. And that's equivalent to little love. And then Krishna gives us this realization. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time, this purification, because to get it realization really, one must enter anartha nivritti. Anartha nivritti. One must be studying one's devotional service, and then, but anartha nivritti, that stage in Harinam Chintamani, the Haridas Thakur refers to that stage as Nam Abbas. Nam Abbas is anartha nivritti. But he says, yeah, why can't we enter this Nam Abbas? That we have thirst for dead things in this material world, that we commit aparat, make offenses. And that is the point. In the beginning, Srila Prabhupada asked in all temples to recite these 10 offenses again, to recite these 10 offenses against the holy name. And Srila Prabhupada write it down personally. All these 10 offenses are forms of disrespect for the instructions of the spiritual master and the spiritual master, disrespect for devotees, disrespect for the holy name. So, and that is the Kanishta. The Kanishta, he sees Krishna and accepts Krishna as Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he has not that vision that to understand who are Krishna's associates. And if you don't behave properly to Krishna's associate, you cannot love Krishna. That will not happen. Because Krishna is everything, all living entities. We cannot say, oh, I love everyone, but not this person. No, they are all part and parcels of Krishna. So we must give up this duality of desire and hate and understand how everyone is conditioned in this world. That we must come to the Madhyam platform. That's the Madhyam platform. Ishvaratat adine shubalisesha trivachesa. Prema maitri pomekta yat karoti samadhyama. So he sees the Madhyam Adhikar, one who is becoming advanced and is purified, that is respectful, that he develops love for Krishna, but also loving relationships with devotees. And he wants to please Krishna with preaching, but by following his instructions in Bhagavad Gita, he preaches to the innocent, to the devotees, to the innocent, not to those who are envious of Krishna. So we see that this consciousness develops if we follow in Brahma's footsteps. Brahma understood this is all the energy of the Supreme Lord. It is the energy of the Supreme Lord. And I can only be the instrument. When he prayed in the second canto to the Lord, he prayed for these three things, that empowerment, protection against Maya, introspection, so that he could, introspection is that point at how to get practical knowledge, that he was praying for these things. And what was the answer of the Lord? He appeared before him, they shook hands, and the Lord said, everything you asked for is granted. If you are always following my instructions, you will be protected by Maya. Because that was a point in previous lectures we discussed. The fight against Maya. Mama Maya Duracha, Krishna says. Maya is stronger than us. We cannot conquer Maya. Maya will get us. But the only way to come out of the situation is surrender to Krishna. Become absorbed in your service. Become absorbed in your service. And then you are out of the influence of Maya. That's the point. And that is a question discussed in the 11th canto. For the moment, I'm preparing the chapters 10 to 15 in the 11th canto. And Krishna speaks to Uddhav. And there, and the history comes up that at a certain moment, the four Kumaras go to Brahma and says to Brahma, oh, how is that? That the object of the senses, they enter the mind and they are connected. How can we break this connection? That the first thing that Hamsa avatar who says is yes, well, this was Krishna before, but then Hamsa avatar will speak later on that. But the point is that this connection between the senses and the sense objects, then Krishna says to Uddhav that the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material energy. The spirit soul is not conditioned, is not liberated, has nothing to do with these concepts. But one thinks oneself liberated, or one thinks oneself conditioned. That's deep philosophy. That because we are, the point is further than, because we identify with the body through the false ego, and the false ego is our consciousness, which is polluted by the three modes and all these anarthas, which constitutes our false ego. Therefore, we identify with the mind, and because the mind is polluted, it becomes attracted to the sense objects, and then you have that connection. But when we engage in devotional service, we forget about that, and that connection is not there. We see a beautiful flower, a pujari sees a beautiful flower, we say, oh, let me take it over to Krishna. There is no attraction that I want to enjoy it. One understands this is Krishna's energy, we are using that in Krishna's service. But if the same pujari sees someone else and plucking flowers and sniff it, he thinks, oh, what a waste. So that's a different mentality. But when we engage in devotional service, then we don't have time for this. This connection is not there as long as we absorbed in devotional service. Of course, devotional service means devotional service. Service is external, devotion is internal. The devotional part is very important. That, of course, in the beginning we don't have that. Like Brahmananda in the beginning said to Srila Prabhupada that yes, we bow down for you, but I don't feel bowing down. And Srila Prabhupada replied, you just bow down, the feeling will come. So that's important. If our motivation is right, then we will become purified. And in the beginning, we have already affection, but then really love, that comes later. But then one has the realization, if one has a good sadhana, then the first thing to come out of this so-called attraction between the object of the senses and the mind is understanding that you are not the mind. It's very important. If we want to advance, we have to become observers of the mind. What's happening in my mind? Oh, it's going there. That's not good. You should bring it back. When it wanders, you have to bring it back. Observe your mind. Observe the world. And don't go into it with attachment. Just look at the cinema of the mind, what it is. Look at it and let it there. And then, because if you observe the mind, what's happening in the mind? Desires come and ideas comes and so on. Where are the ideas? Why is that coming into the mind? That Sarvasya Samridishani Vishtamata Shmidriyanamapamsa. Krishna says, I give remembrance and knowledge, everything in the mind, and all the endeavors in the mind. It's all Krishna doing as a super soul. But if we become the observer, then the soul with desire will guide the intelligence to engage the mind and the senses in Krishna's service. And when it's engaged and dovetailed in Krishna's service, then that connection between the sense objects and the mind is not there. Krishna is in your mind. That makes it much difference. And then you come out of the influence of Maya. But you must learn to do that always. And that's a great challenge. Of course, we are not like the gopis. When Krishna was taken by Krura to Mathura, then the gopis said that they came together and said, yes, left us. So why should we continue to think of him? Is now the objects of affection of the damsels of Mathura. So why should we still think of him? Another gopi said, yes, let's forget us about him. Let's forget how beautiful he is. And then another gopi said, yes, let's forget how he danced with us. And another gopi said, yet let's forget how he smiled with us. But they could not stop thinking of Krishna. They could not be deviated from thinking of Krishna for a moment. They wanted Krishna out of their mind, but it was not possible The great yogis, they try to meditate on Krishna and so much trouble, and they cannot get Krishna out of their minds. That's interesting. I heard that story here in America in the 70s somewhere. Maybe you can confirm, or maybe you have heard about it, but there was a devotee. He was 2 years doing book distribution, and then he blooped. And 2 years later, the devotees were visiting him. And they said, "How are you doing?" Well, he said, I'm trying to forget Krishna, but every day he comes into my mind. So yes, you try to forget him. That's what I found an interesting point. That, but when we follow Brahma here, we pray to the Lord for empowerment. And then this practical knowledge, it means that we are only an instrument in Krishna's service. Nirmita Matram. And if we get that humble disposition and try our best to serve Krishna with whatever he gives us, that just to please Krishna, then Krishna can do those wonderful things to us. Srila Prabhupada in Markini Bhagavad Dharma, this poem that he wrote when he arrived in Boston, he writes, yes, that I can only be your instrument. I'm like a puppet on a string. So if you want to make me dance, let me dance. That you have given me the name Bhaktivedanta, but I'm just, if you want, you can make this true. And if I can be your instrument. So that's Srila Prabhupada, his humility, understanding that he was just an instrument following the instructions of his spiritual master. This requires great simplicity and faith. Paradeva, yeah, what's that quote? Just by following the instructions of the spiritual master, that with great unflinching faith, all the inputs of the Vedas are revealed. That so if we have that attitude, we will get the right practical knowledge and be empowered by that. It's so beautiful. It means living in a relationship with Krishna. This is the basis of living in a relationship with Krishna. This mood of surrender, that which starts with humility. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Corrections? All right.
Okay, I had a simple question. It was during the earlier part of your lecture. You mentioned that when Brahma creates, he's not even sure exactly how he does it. You know, he's got a body of pure intelligence, and you said he had a causal body, both of those things you mentioned. I'm convinced that that's true. that Brahma doesn't exactly know how he creates, he just does it. But did you read that somewhere, or that was the conclusion that you came from too?
I read it somewhere, but don't ask me where. I'm not an encyclopedia, but I read it for certain that Brahma himself does not know how it in detail works. Of course, he has some knowledge about it. He knows how to do it, but he is an instrument of the Supreme Lord, and it is factually prakriti, yeah, it is Mayadaksana Prakriti, the super soul who makes everything working. That, yeah.
Well, we see that even in our own lives, that there's so many things that we do unconsciously that actually require a great degree of precision, but somehow we manage to do it without knowing exactly how it happens.
Yeah, just you are speaking words. That speaking is done by the super soul, not by us. We are only desiring that you move your hand. It's Krishna moving your hand. So an Uttamadikar sees Krishna in that way every moment. Every moment.
Even the karmis have no good theory of how children learn languages.
Yeah.
You know, that you're born into a family and you learn the language of that family, and they have this idea that maybe the mother says the same word like cat over and over again, and eventually you associate cats with the word. But I mean, how many words are there? And certainly that's not the way it usually happens. Somehow or other, children figure out how to learn a language. And later on, if they try to learn a different language, it's much harder as an adult to do it.
Yeah, but as a child, I was born in a Flemish family, Dutch, but I heard French from my birth. So that's natural to speak French or Flemish. And as a child, my father brought me to Germany because he had been war prisoner in Germany. And then we went on vacation in Germany, that every year. And 1 month and I heard German there, so I speak basic German. But it was a whole endeavor to learn English. And now I'm trying to learn some Hindi. Yeah, I know some basic Spanish, but it's a whole endeavor. But as a child, it's natural. You take it up, and that yeah, it's certainly true. Thank you. Yes.
Marsh, can you give us some practical ways to deal with the mind, to be the observer when he's making his whimsical things, making us suffer or be happy?
Yeah, yes. Of course, that manifests itself when we try to chant the Hare Krishna mantra. Then the mind wants to do something else. And then we try to control the mind. It goes away and you bring it back. Hare Krishna, Krishna. You bring it back. But my experience is that's not very effective. But what's effective is try to chant with love, put all your affection in it. And you will see it will go much easier. Because it's factually by devotion that the mind is fully controlled. That, yeah. But of course, that does not mean that, sometimes the mind can be very disturbed. And then it's good to have a good sadhana to live in goodness. That's because that is what Lord Krishna explains in the 11th canto. He says, yes, one should live in goodness And he gives all ways how to live in goodness. And that will help with the control of the mind. Goodness. That, yeah. If one is in goodness, one will come to the realization or get the power to understand that I'm not the mind. But that's also coming from a good sadhana. Then you that but it's also a slow process. By hearing the Bhagavatam, gradually we start to take the mind not so serious. And the mind it's going on spinning, it wants this, it wants that. But when you have a good sadhana, it's also only spinning, you never do it. So that's the point. But gradually, when we become absorbed in devotion, then we forget about the mind. That, yeah. That's yoga, controlling the mind, and that's done factually by devotion. That's a factual control. Does that help? Okay, good. Yes.
Thank you much for the nice class. My question was, you were mentioning how initial stages, though we are supposed to perform devotional service, it's not necessarily devotional service in the initial stages. So I was thinking that, so initially we are more driven by passion to do things. Like we want to do more physical services because it's more easier than sitting and studying or hearing, whatever. So how do we move, or how do we uplift our consciousness from the platform of passion to the point of, to the platform of, say, transcendence, where whether we are performing service or we are doing sadhana, it is actually devotional service, it is pleasing to Guru and Krishna. What steps can we take?
Yeah. If you do your service really to please the spiritual master, that is a cause of getting Krishna's mercy. You need really Krishna's mercy to get control of the mind. But Krishna's mercy comes also to his instructions in Bhagavad Gita, and how to cultivate goodness and so on. And that by following his instructions, you come from two sides. One is mercy, but we must also make the endeavor to apply all these instructions. And that in itself will help us. But it's a slow process. Srila Prabhupada's a slow process of devotional service, and that it helps. That it's like Arjuna when Abhimanyu was killed, he was disturbed. But he used this disturbance in his devotional service. That was, and it didn't last long, the disturbance. So it does, but in the mind of a beginner, if the mind is disturbed, when it's disturbed by something, it can last for weeks. Oh, this person did that to me, and this and that and that. But if you advance, then you may be still disturbed, but then after 5 minutes, oh, you let it go. You have the power to let it go. You don't take it so serious anymore. That then, because you get more surrender to Krishna, that all these things in the mind are not important. And therefore Krishna says in the Uddhava Gita, wake up. We are not this mind. We are not this body. That have nothing to do with it. That and waking up means I'm a spirit soul and engaged in Krishna service. And then the identification with the gross body, that's going quick. That comes slackened, and then the misidentification with the subtle body. That's really the big point. So we are working on, Krishna consciousness works on its subtle level. Nobody can see outside. Two devotees do the same thing. One is a neophyte, the other is advanced. Externally you don't see, but internally they are quite different. Externally you can also see the advanced devotee is always happy and never disturbed. Or if some disturbance element comes, yeah, he's steady in his devotional service and tolerates. Don't think it's very significant. But these are advanced stages that we all pray to the Supreme Lord to be merciful, that we can all realize all these things by a sincere engagement in his devotional service. Thank you. Yes.
One technical question, because you were speaking in the beginning how species, the living entities are born. I remember we were discussing with devotees in the past. Some devotees are wondering how exactly the 8,400,000 species are born or manifested in this world. Did they just come out of, pop out of nothing and then disappear? How does it happen?
That is what this chapter is about. That the Brahma will create 10 divisions of, and they are all explained here. That 8 creation, it's all explained in the next verses. So be a little patient. You will hear about this first creation of all these categories. Of course, they are part of the 8,400,000 species. That, of course, the Bhagavatam cannot explain every species, and then we would have a lot of verses. But basically, that's explained in this chapter. You will hear that. Yes.
Well, there's, the basic idea that Brahma is the first being in the universe, and he creates certain living entities from his mind. There's a whole category of living entities he creates from his mind, but later on, those living entities interact. Of course, he wanted the 4 Kumaras to create, and they refused. Then he wanted Shiva to create, but he created the wrong kind of living entities, and he told Shiva to stop. And then there is Kasyap Muni, and he has these various daughters given to him, daughters of Dakshina. And from Kasyap Muni, and I forget how many of it there were like 14, 16, something like that, wives of Kasyap Muni. And each one gave birth to a different class of living entities. Like there was the mother of the birds, Kadru was the mother of the snakes. You had the mother of the cloven-hooved animals. You had the mother of the plants, one of Kasyap Muni's. There was another one of Kasyap Muni's wives who was the mother of all the insects. And of course, they were demigoddesses, so they didn't give birth in the usual way to a type of living entity who was very different than they. But, there was some manner in which they did it because, on that level, creation is a different operation that is on our level, as locked in human beings in a material form with all the limitations involved.
Yeah, I made on this chapter because all what Maharaj says is further described here. Kashyapa Muni created so many, but I have a PowerPoint presentation on it from each of these 10 categories with pictures. But I made it, but it was for a Dutch presentation, so the text is in Dutch. But yeah, I can show it next time. That if we are further, maybe I will give another class after I come back from Avacha. Then we can show it, all the pictures, visual.
An interesting thing that, you know, with all the talk about Darwin and evolution, that if you look at the fossil record, there's a period where suddenly a huge amount of species appear. And that's called the Cambrian explosion, you know, that before the Cambrian explosion, there are just very small one-cell living entities. And suddenly with the Cambrian explosion, instead of as Darwin hypothesized, that you had gradual things evolving up, the rock record shows that there was a period of time, the Cambrian period, where suddenly from nothing, not just one, but many species appeared out of whole cloth. You know, they just appeared. And what's that? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was when Kashyapa Muni's wives decided to, you know, populate. And there was a point when that happened. You know, so maybe there's something more. It's probably more nuanced than that. But at any rate, scientists have no explanation for it. But it's a fact, and everybody knows it, you know, as far as archaeology and, you know, the story of things evolving. But I just thought I'd add that little bit to it.
Great. Thank you so much. Good. Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.